Good morning, members. We have now formed a quorum. So we are holding the meeting of the housing panel so as to listen to the public and receive the views on the waiting time for public rental housing. So at this moment, please invite the deputations individuals to join us, and please also invite the administration's team to come in. Today, we have got altogether 68 individuals and deputations attending our hearing. So first of all, let's wait for the deputations and individuals to be seated before we talk about today's arrangements. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the public hearing. This is to receive public views on public waiting time for public rental housing. 68 deputations and individuals have put down their names to attend our meeting. So there will be two sessions. First of all, the first session will end at 10:55, and then another one will start at 11 a.m. and it will take us to 12:55. When we start each session, we will give the floor to the deputations individuals. Each will have 3 minutes to speak. For deputations individuals, please note that your submission, both in writing and orally, will not be protected by the Electrical Powers and Privileges Ordinance. Please also note that for those members of the public who are in the public gallery listening to our meeting, you need to follow the various security measures. We have got a note in the letter sent to you. So this also applies to those who attend the meeting as well as those in the public gallery. There is also a copy tabled before you. You may also get a copy from our staff. We have got the earpiece for you, channel 0 for the floor, channel 1 for Cantonese, channel 2 for English, channel 3 for Putonghua. For every session, I will give the floor to the individuals and deputations to speak. After that, the administration will be asked to give a simple overall reply, and then members who are in attendance will be given the chance to ask questions. For today's meeting, in attendance, we've got the following public officers: Ms. Agnes Wong, Deputy Secretary for Transport and Housing; Mr. Anson Lai, Assistant Director, Strategic Planning Housing Department; and Mrs. Rosa Ho, Assistant Director, Housing Subsidies Housing Department. Welcome. I'll now invite the deputations individuals to speak. First of all, from the Society for Community Organizations, Mr. Chik Kui Wai, the community organizer. 3 minutes, please. Thank you. On behalf of the Society for Community Organization, I would like to address you. Between 2010 to 2014, the average waiting time will be much longer. Well, in fact, we have just exceeded the pledge. It is 3.05 years. I would like to talk about the case of those who have 2 to 4P in the household. There is one 4P household. They've been waiting for 6-7 years, and they haven't got an elderly member. They haven't even got any chance to be interviewed. We did the inquiry for them, and the housing department said that they had not yet been given any offer. Now, every time when we ask for the definition, it is said that it's about the number of people who was offered in the past 12 months. Well, first offer in the past 12 months. That's the definition. Every year, there would only be 10 to 20,000 waiting list applicants could get an offer that will be counted. Another 100,000 or so applicants will not be assessed. So the 3-year period would be a huge underestimation. And secondly, for the case about the 4P households, for 7 years, they haven't been allocated a flat. Every June, we get the statistics for 4P households. Towards the end of March 2013, there were 23,000 households on the waiting list. Only 1,700 were given an offer. 4P households suffer most because we are getting small units being built. 4P households have been overlooked. We did go to the Complaints Division of the LegCo. We asked for an opinion, and the reply was quite interesting. And that's about larger units. For the 4 years, from 13 to 16, we have got 16% of the units built that are 2-bedroom units. There will be an increase from 1,500 to 5,400 from the years of 13-14 to 16-17, but then 10,000 will be 2-bedroom units. I think it will still be 1,000 or so in the 3 years in the 4-year period. So I want to know what has happened so as to come up with such bad assessment. It is said that for the supply of certain units, it is difficult to tell, and so it is not appropriate for them to make announcements about the figures. So they are following the case of the THB. That is, they would like to do the same to public housing as in the case of the XRL. Your time is up. Next, Mr. Men Yu Ming from Federation of Public Housing Estates. For us in the Federation, we believe that we need to build more PRH units before we can honor the pledge of waiting time. In his first policy address, Siwa Leung told us that housing would be the most important policy that he has to handle. And of course, it is important for our social development. For us in the Federation, we have said that we need to build 28,000 PRH units and then 8,000 HOS units, and there must be 25,000 private units to be built every year. But then for the long-term housing strategy as a steering committee, it would only be 470,000 in the 10-year period, among which only for the first 5 years. And then in the first 5 years, only 1/3 of the target will be reached. So we're worried about the supply. In April 2014, the Audit Commission issued Report 62. Well, in fact, on average, the waiting time will be increased from 3 to 5 years. We believe that this means that the administration cannot honor the pledge of a 3-year average waiting time. As to the reason, I think this is because between 1997 and 2002, instead of building 28,000 units, we have only got 15,000. In other words, in 10 years' time, we get 130,000 units fewer, and that's why we have a long waiting list. To resolve the problem, we would like to suggest a solution. In the past, we used to have 8 districts for people to choose from, but now for administrative expediency, the number of districts have been reduced to 4. It's difficult. Now for NT East and NT West, it's very different. It can range from Tuen Mun to Tsuen Wan or even Shengshui. So the difference is huge. And therefore it is difficult to choose a flat during the first offer. In addition, we believe that there is also one other suggestion that's worth considering. That is, it is possible to be offered 3 units in one go so as to reduce the waiting time. We just wonder if the Housing Department can support our proposal. Moreover, the waiting time should be the actual time taken to be allocated a flat. I think the HD's proposal or approach is not realistic. According to the auditor's proposal, we should take into account the actual waiting time. Thank you. Your time is up. Next, Mr. Lau Ka-yu Martin from Hong Kong People's Council on Housing Policy. Thank you. General households should only need to wait for 3 years. Elderly members can get faster allocation, but this doesn't apply to the non-elderly applicants. So we'll focus on the non-elderly applicants. For the non-elderly applicants, there are a lot of them, 110,000, but then yearly quota is 2,000 only. Even if we stop receiving applications, it will take us 50 years before we can allocate flats to all those on the waiting list, so they never get a chance to be allocated a flat. We've studied the matter, and then we've come up with 4 suggestions.
First, we think that we should identify the real needs of the non-elderly singletons to ascertain the real needs. We know that many applicants don't have a job or they are students when they are applying for PRH. Even if they are a PRH unit, they will still have to be supported by their families. So they will be living with their family. So we ask that an extra criterion be added, and that is that they should be a worker, an employee. Second, under the QPS, every year means an extra 3 marks. We think that this is a reasonable system because those who are older, they have a more pressing need for PRH. Now, there are those who are living in caged homes, cubicles, and subdivided units. They have to pay for their own rent, and they have a heavy burden. And I think that in the QPS, the living environment of those applicants should be taken into account. And those who live with their families, they may have a lower need for PRH, so their marks should be deducted, and 30 marks should be deducted from them. Third, we think that the government should increase the number of places allocated for non-elderly single elderton. In the 2011 by census, over 30% of them never get married, and that is way above the 8% quota now. So in the principle of fairness, we think that the quota for non-elderly single applicants should be increased, and we think that 20% is a right figure. And lastly, the government should think about increasing the number of housing for different people. Say for the tertiary students, the government should think about providing them with HOS. The government should also consider hostels for singletons to ease the housing needs of the young people, and also to help those in the caged homes and the cubicles. So we think that these suggestions will work. Next is the Hong Kong Institute of Housing. Thank you, Chairman. Good morning. I speak for the Hong Kong Institute of Housing. The Institute understands the HA's need to preserve or make the best use of the precious housing resources, and we appreciate the present policy. As of the March 2013, the HA manages 162 PRH estates, and there are 710,000 units with a population of over 2 million people. The Institute believes that the HA should continue to shoulder the responsibility of providing housing for Hong Kong people. PRH is a major policy of addressing our housing needs, so we must make sure that PRH units are allocated in a fair manner. Now, the number of applicants has continued to soar, and the HA's target of maintaining this 3-year waiting time is being challenged. But then the Institute believes that even when there may be deviations from this target in the short term, it should be maintained. Now, according to NICSHA's survey in 2012, around half of those non-elderly singletons aged 35 are tertiary educated. Now, in order that the public housing resources be allocated to those who are in greater housing need, the Institute suggests that an examination of the eligibility criteria of those applicants should be made once every 2 years, including their asset and income levels. Now, because of this, the Institute believes that the projection for housing needs should be updated every year so that the appropriate policies can be updated and drawn up. Also, those aged 35 and who are single have lower social mobility, so they should be given priority under the QPS. Now, for those aged 55, they should be included as part of the general applicants and should be allocated a flat within 3 years. And the Institute believes that the supply-led approach is right, and the HA should supply more flats, PRH units, to address the housing needs. And we believe that the public housing ratio should be maintained at least 60%, and also effort should be made to tackle abuse of public housing resources. Next, Mr. Michael Lee. The Liberal Party supports the government building more PRH. Now, there are now 234,000 people on the waiting list, and there are some 67,000 people living in SDUs. There are two deficiencies in the PRH policies. The government has not been doing the best job in allocating PRH units. We have expressed our views in the last public hearing. Second, in provision of new PRH units, the government has been arbitrary in its policies, and the Liberal Party hopes that the government can consolidate and compile statistics on the present housing situation and also come up with a timetable in the provision of private and public housing so that we know what's going on. Also, if there is land, we're going to build houses. The government must map out a manpower need plan to build housing, because the housing projects volume are at its peak. Now, according to the consultation paper, in the next 10 years, there will be 470,000 housing units to be built, compared to the 300,000 units built in the past, and that's a big increase, and there is a huge need for manpower. Now, there are also other infrastructure projects like the Third Runway, Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge, and Sha-Tin Central Link. So there is an acute manpower shortage in the construction industry. The Construction Industry Council said that in 2013, then there is a shortfall of 10,000 workers in the industry. And semi-skilled workers and skilled workers registered, they take up only 30% of all construction workers. And construction workers are also aging. 68% of them are over 40 and 43% over 50, and those aged below 30 takes up only 13% of the total workforce. Now, if the manpower problem deteriorates, then infrastructures, projects and public housing projects are going to be affected. So the Liberal Party reiterates its stand that the government should draw up a special labor import scheme for importing workers for such infrastructure projects and housing projects, so that the housing problem of the grassroots can be resolved as soon as possible. Thank you. Next, Ms. Cynthia Zhang. Thank you, Chairman. I'm a university student. And most of us will not be surprised that actually many of us are thinking of buying our own homes. And actually, some of them are applying for a PRH unit when we're at university, because we all know that the waiting time is very long. And we are afraid that we don't have a house to live in, even after we've graduated for several years. Now, for the past PRH policy, with PRH units are really for those in need. But then nowadays, we are having income limits, asset limits, and there is a sample check only on a few hundred people, so there may be abuse of the among the applicants. And for those who are in real need of PRH, who have waiting for a long time, we are made to even wait longer. So the government should face up to the problem, and it should take more random samples of those applicants. Also, the waiting list is getting longer and longer. The government says the average waiting time is 3 years, but the actual waiting time is more than that. Now, the waiting list is getting longer, and the PRH units are insufficient. Should we be waiting for over 10 years to get a PRH? So it doesn't mean that even a primary school student has to start waiting for or applying for PRH. Now, the HA said that some 470,000 units will be made available in the next 10 years. But then how many can get a PRH unit in 3 years? I don't think that the number of flats will catch up with a waiting list. We don't have enough money to buy our own flat. How long have we to wait? Last year, only 16,000 people can get a PRH unit, and many have waited for as long as 8 years. So who can get a unit in 3 years? Now, we are earning a low wage, and many of us, the majority of us, are applying for and waiting for PRH. Why doesn't the government build more PRH units? When can the government give us a specific timetable on when the grassroots will be given a flat? Now, thank you very much, Chairman. Mr. Henry is not here yet. Next, Mr. Alex Fu. Good morning. I've just graduated from secondary school. I'm going to enter university, and after that, we will be waiting for a PRH. Now, let's look at the QPS system. For young people, we get the lowest score in the QPS. That means that we have to wait the longest time to get a PRH unit. Some groups said that we have to wait for an average 63 years to get a unit. Now, if, say, I am in my 20s, I started applying for a PRH unit, it will be only in my 70s will I get a PRH unit, and it's not a self-owned flat, but rather a rented flat. And actually, the middle class income are also suffering, and their income exceed the income limit, but then their income make them very difficult for them to afford a private housing unit. Now, 1 square foot sells for as many as tens of thousands of dollars, and even for subdivided units, the monthly rent is several $1,000s. Now, for the elderly, they are given a greater priority, which means that they can get a unit relatively sooner. But I'm not saying that they don't deserve a PRH unit, but should we be allocating the PRH units to those who are in more need or in greater need? Third, under the QPS, the disabled or the persons with disabilities, they are made to wait a long time too. They are now living in SDUs. They don't have work capability, and SDUs are poor in the environment, in the management standards, and the staircases are in poor conditions. How can a PW can climb staircases? Also, Should we be selling land to property developers to build luxury flats? Should we retain those land plots to build more PRH to house those in need? We shouldn't be helping the property developers to profiteer. So please consider the situation of various people and help those really in need. Next, Mr. Michael Fong. I'm not an applicant for the PRH, but then I think as a member of the public, I feel obliged to give some views on humanitarian grounds. Now, for some PWDs, they are waiting for PRH because rents are so exorbitant. They are forced to live in partitioned flats and SDUs. Well, we all know how poor the living condition is in these flats. In SDUs, they don't have adequate fire prevention facilities, and the corridors are narrow. Now, in case of fire, for the hearing impaired and those who are disabled physically, what can they do? Now, in these old buildings, they don't have escalators normally. For the hearing impaired and those who aren't really mobile, they have to take the stairs. So it's very inconvenient for them. So I think the government should draw up a specific and fair point system for these PWDs based on their individual circumstances and their economic conditions and so on. For those who can't afford private rental and are forced to live in poor conditions, they should be given extra marks. In that way, we can prevent people from thinking that the handicapped people are abusing the QPS and also jumping the queue. Now, also for some families, they have to wait for 8 years before they get a flat. But then CE promised that there will be an average waiting time of 3 years. So why isn't he delivering his promise? Now, there are some 12,000 vacant units, and 800 of them have been vacant for over a year. So what is the HA doing about those? Now, if the management level is so poor, well, no matter how many buildings, how many estates are we building in NENT, that would not be of help. I think the HA should also build more flats for 4P households, because for some 4P households, they have to wait even longer than the 3P households. So that goes against the fairness principle. Some groups said that for the non-elderly singletons, under the QPS, they have to wait 63 years before they can get a flat. I have every sympathy for them. But then what's more pressing is that the government should take care of the needs of the PWDs, because their lives will be endangered in where they are living now. So I think the government should provide more PRH units. Next, Mr. Lo Ho Yun from the Fourth Right Caucus. We are disappointed that only the Deputy Secretary is here to listen to our views. Why don't they send the Secretary or the Under-Secretary here? Now, housing is a right and not a commodity. Under the urban renewal projects, housing is made a commodity. We find that very regrettable. Is the government really sincere or serious in increasing PRH units? In Kai Tak, 3% of the land is used to build PRH, and in NT, 6% only. The PRH are there for the grassroots. I think the government should do more to build more PRH out. Now, in the waiting list, there are some 200,000 applicants. In the government's paper, it also says that in the next 5 years, less than 20,000 units will be built. That's far from adequate. Now, some friends here have said, highlighted the needs of the PWDs in housing. And the visually impaired have to live in SDUs. Now, without appropriate aids to help them, then the hearing impaired are really having a difficult time, and the government must do something about it. Without fire services facilities, SDUs will pose a great danger to the lives of the PWDs when there is a fire. So what are the needs of the PWDs? Now, under the QPS, a lot of the PWD young people have to wait indefinitely. Well, they have to wait at least 7 to 8 years. The norm is around 10 years to get a unit. They are housed in poor housing for a long time. I think this is depriving them of their right to adequate housing. I think the government must improve the compassionate rehousing policy, because for the PWDs who are applying for compassionate rehousing, the criteria differ from person to person, and the PWD, some PWDs have to present a certificate to say that they don't have a leg, or they are blind, or what, and this is most unreasonable. So I must say again that housing is a right and not a commodity, and the THB is duty bound to address the problem. So should we be setting up a separate queue for the PWDs, just like the elderly, so that they can get a flat more quickly?
Next, Mr. Yeo Kin Ward, Democratic Alliance for the Betterment and Progress of Hong Kong. Thank you. At present, we have the most number of applicants on the waiting list, over 240,000, but the government's housing production cannot cater them with enough units. So this is the position of the DAB. First of all, we want the government to ensure that the WAT is kept at 3 years. It is heard that the AWT will exceed 3 years in the coming few years, and in 2020 it will be extended to 5 years. And for 4P household, the waiting time is longer. According to HA's data in March last year, for 4P households, now there are 23,000 cases, and for those who have waited for more than 3 years, there are about 8,000 of them. In the past year, only 1,400 4P households have been housed. And for new estates like Kai Ching Estate, the units are normally only 37 square meters, and it's smaller than the more than 40 meters in previous years. And now we understand that we only have limited resources. When it comes to housing, we think that elderly should be given a priority. But for the non-elderly one-person applicants, the waiting time should be shortened, in particular for those who are above middle age, because it's more difficult for them to move upward in the society. So it's difficult for them to improve their living environment, so they need help. And also, thirdly, the long-term housing strategies committee's proposal should be seriously taken, and also new towns should be built. As for Chai Hong Estate and Nik Yuen Estate, this kind of old housing estates, they should be redeveloped so that more units can be produced, then the pressure on the AWT can be eased. And fourthly, PLH includes a lot of public money, so we think that public resources should be used at a more appropriate manner. And also there are many vacant units. Such vacant units should be renovated as soon as possible so that they can be reallocated ASAP. And also random checks should be made more frequently so that people will not abuse housing resources. We want to ensure that the precious housing resources can be used in a better manner. To solve the housing problem for the grassroots, the SAR government should take it very seriously. We hope the government will adopt a more rational attitude when it comes to dealing with this matter. Next, no flat slaves, Mr. Chang Ka-wing. Thank you, Chairman. We are 17 years after the handover, but the government is openly colluding with the business sector, and the health health gap in society is getting worse. As of March this year, there are over 280,000 applicants on the waiting list. Chairman, this is a consequence of the government's poor decision in 2005, and non-elderly one-person applicants have been discriminated against since then. Only less than 2,000 quotas are given to non-elderly one-person applicants. In particular, young people are facing a more serious housing problem. There are a lot of singletons who are in need of housing, but they have to wait for over 10 years before they can get house. Now, this is a staggering figure. The government should build more PRH flats to cater for this demand. However, the government is not implementing this kind of policy. And lately, an HA member, Ibrahim, even said that there should be a review arrangement. That is for the non-elderly one-person applicants. After 2 years of waiting, the government should send them a letter asking them if they still want to wait. And if they do not reply, then their application would be cancelled. Actually, in 1993, this was done by the HA, and 5,100 applicants were given such a letter. And at the end of the day, many of their applications were cancelled. And for 80% of the applicants whose applications were cancelled, most of the time is because they have moved or they could not be contacted. So that's why the applications were cancelled. Now, if the HA is going to do this again this time, well, at that time, 1/4 of applicants were kicked out. So if the HA does it again, about 30,000 applicants will be removed from the existing waiting list. So our organization objects strongly to this, and we think that the QPS is discriminatory. And we want to warn the government. The government should not slight the problem of youth housing. Otherwise, young people will be all coming out to fight the government. Next, Hong Kong Federation of the Blind, Ms. Jessica Yan. Thank you, Chairman. I speak on behalf of the Hong Kong Federation of the Blind and all the persons with disabilities. I am a 100% visually impaired person because I am young. So that's why I have been applying for PLH for 1 year, and I have been living in an SDU for 6 years. 2 social workers, I have contacted 2 social workers. They both refused me. They said that's because I have a job and I can pay high rent. So what they mean is that I have no need for compassionate housing. So they asked me to be a general applicant, but I have to wait for 10 years. I am 100% disabled. I am already getting the government disability allowance. How come these 2 social workers still ask me to go to a doctor, to ask the doctor to give me a certificate to prove that I am a blind person? Isn't this absurd? I am young, and they say that PWDs are not given priority in waiting for public housing. But as a PWD, I have to pay at least $4,000 for an SDU. But can PWDs find jobs as easily as able-bodied people? Have you considered this? It is very difficult for us to get a job, and our pay is not high. So it would not exceed the income limit of the PLH schemes. My two parents are both blind too. So I want to ask, I have such a huge need. How come I'm refused by all the government departments? Is the government not discriminating against PWDs? Next, housing rights for disability, Mr. Chun Chung Yuk. Since 2005, that is the implementation of QPS for non-elderly one-person applicants. Well, many young PWDs have been waiting for PLH, and some of them have been waiting for over 8 years. Many of them are now living in SDUs. And many of these applicants, it's just like Guyan who said just now, they are forced to live in old buildings with no barrier-free facilities, and there is safety and fire problem for them. Many PWDs have been waiting for many years for housing. The system just ignores their needs. When the government replies to our letter, they say that PWDs can go through the compassionate housing channel or the express channel. However, we have seen examples like this, that is, PWDs have tried these two channels, but they were not successful. As for compassionate housing, our group has handled at least 40 compassionate housing cases. However, the approval criteria were very different, and half of these applications were rejected. They used different reasons. For example, for a blind person or a person with a leg, they have to ask a doctor to prove that they are blind or they do not have a leg. So they are coming with up all sorts of excuses to reject these applications. And PWDs do not have a proper channel to apply for PLH. So compassionate rehousing and the express line are both meaningless. Well, just like Kayan just has 56 points. She still has to wait for 5 to 8 years before she can be housed. We have also asked the government, in the waiting list, there are 120,000 single people. But how many of them are PWDs? There's no statistics. They only get the information of how many of them are university graduates, but there is no record of PWDs. So it shows that the government just doesn't pay attention to the needs of the PWDs. If you adopt such a broad brush arrangement and only 2,000 units are provided to them each year, then there will be no future for the PWDs. So for the singleton applicants, QPS, there must be some change. And also the government should have a statistics of how many PWDs are in the waiting line. And also the government should honor its words of an AWT of 3 years. So we think that PWDs should be given a fair chance, and the waiting time of 3 years should also be given to them. Thank you. Next, Community Development Officer, Mr. Chang Chi-pan of New People's Party. Thank you, Chairman. My name is Chang Chi-pan. I'm a representative of New People's Party. The government has promised waiting time of 3 years, but it's a lie. Many people have been waiting in the queue for more than 10 years, and over 80% of them are 3 to 4P households. And for those who have housed, 3 to 4P households accounts for only 30%. So you can see that there is a serious shortage in 3 to 4P household units. And if you want to get a unit in the urban district, you practically will never get it. So now there is a serious imbalance when it comes to the supply and demand of public housing. And the long strategy committee says that there will be a huge need of housing units, but the government says that it will only build 170,000 in the coming 10 years. So the supply will not meet the demand, and waiting time will be getting longer and longer. The government is now facing a serious problem. No land, no people. Now, if you want to build housing, you need to identify sites, but there are a lot of obstacles. And also there is a serious shortage in of manpower in the construction industry, and there are so many projects in the pipeline. I'm worried that there will be a serious manpower problem. I don't think the government can reach its goal of housing production. So the New People's Party has the following proposals. First, the supply and demand in public housing should be improved. We don't think the present data should be used for a future forecast. The government should come up with a more forward-looking method to assess the future need of public housing. And also, elderly and core families should be given priority, in particular core families. We suggest that more 3 to 4P flats should be built so that their waiting time can be shortened. And there should be more construction workers. There should be a two-pronged approach, for example, local training. And the image of the industry should also be improved so that young people can be attracted to the industry. And also the government should consider the importation of foreign workers. Fourthly, we suggest that more public housing units be produced, and the proportion of green and white forms should be revised. For those green form tenants, after they are housed in HOS, then the waiting time for PLH can be shortened. These are the proposals of the New People's Party. Thank you. Next, Alliance for Defending Grassroots Housing Rights, Ms. Yin Pik Fan. Thank you, Chairman. I represent Alliance for Defending Grassroots Housing Rights. As for PLH, it has always been providing housing to grassroots. However, ever since 2012, there has been no new provision of HOS, and for PLH units, there has not been enough supply. Although I've said that the WT is 3 years, but it's just a lie. People would not get housed within 3 years. And the government does not implement the rental control on private housing sector. So it's very difficult for people to live in private housing, so they have no choice and they have to wait for public housing. Our organization has been talking to the secretaries. We say that if a long-term housing policy is not formulated, and if you do not build more PLH units, the problem will only deteriorate and aggravate. Now, the government has put together a long-term housing strategy, but we think that it is useless, and it has invited a lot of criticism. The so-called projections and housing productions, they will not be able to meet the present need. Well, the government was trying to make an assessment. However, it said that that's not enough land. So that's why Northeast NT has to sacrifice. The people, the residents who've been living there for decades have to be moved out. But then the government would have to move other people in to Fanling. And these people are not familiar with Fanling. So the government is repeating what it did in the 70s and 80s. That is large-scale housing restructure was done. But at that time, people could be rehoused in the same area. However, for the residents who are living in NT now, they cannot be rehoused in the same district. Now, housing PLH units cannot be provided in 1 or 2 years. So can the government do other things? For example, the household policy can be relaxed, and if some children of have already moved out, they can be allowed to move back into the original household. So if the household rules can be eased, then the housing problem can be resolved a bit. Next, Mr. McKinway, Crossroads Development Center. SDUs are now almost as expensive as a luxury flats, but people can only live in a small size like a caged home. This is a poverty indicator in Hong Kong. PRH has been developing in Hong Kong for 60 years, but now still there are 250,000 families waiting for PRH units. In the 60s, the government built public housing for poor people, and for those who lived in private buildings, the government also had a rental control policy to help them. In 1985, the government set up singleton applicant list, and a lot of units were built for singletons. And Chris Patten made a target of 38,000. So how come we are facing such a huge problem now? It's because in the 80s, the government launched a housing policy which was led by the private sector, and it also connived at real estate developers. So that's why since then there has been not enough public housing supply. Now the government should produce at least 30 to 40,000 PRH units a year, but where will the land come from? And how can the waiting time of 3 years be maintained? The government should implement rental control. Rental cap should be introduced so as to ensure people can lead a reasonable life.
We have 5 proposals. First of all, revive the rent control. Those who have been on the waiting list for 3 years should be given a rent subsidy by the government. Second, we should relax the policies so that many young people who may want to remain with their families in their PRH units will not need to queue up on their own, because if they have to do so, that would only lengthen the waiting list. Thirdly, we should provide more PRH units. We should construct more such units, but then we need land to do that. And fourthly, for the QPS, which is unfair to the young, I think it should be demolished. Fifthly, we are against any policies that would turn PRH units into commodities. For the 200,000 people on the waiting list, we hope that they will get allocated ASAP. But then we have got some low-ranking officials in attendance. We are most unhappy about that. We have put forward our case to Professor Zheng, the Secretary for TH, but it seems that our views have not been taken on board in the long-term housing strategy committee. Ms. Chow, organizer of the Industrial Relations Institute, we have already reached 250,000 for the number of households on the waiting list. The 3-year average waiting time can no longer be honored. As to why this has happened, this is because since 2002, we are building less and less PRH units, and then the rent control policy has been abolished, and so there's hegemony in housing. Rentals are beyond our reach. So I think the administration must do the following. First, the unrealistic target should be abandoned. The government should face squarely the question of long waiting time. I think in a moment, many citizens will be talking about the unrealistic waiting target. In fact, we have been waiting much longer than 3 years, many times more than 3 years. The government should abandon playing gimmicks with the statistics. The government should be responsible. Therefore, I think the government should tell us about the number of vacant flats in the PRH estates, the distribution, etc. And then for the 4P, 5B households on the waiting list, tell us when they get their first offer. And we should be given the chance to monitor the allocation of units. And then there should be rent control and rent security, tenancy security. Well, for small subdivided units and smaller living space, in fact, many people have to pay high rent for that. In year 2004, it is thought that housing supply increased, waiting time was shortened, and so the tenants could have a bargaining position, and so rent control was withdrawn. But then for 10 years, we've seen an increase in the rental. Tenants don't have any bargaining power in the rental market, so rental control should be revived so that the grassroots will be given safeguard. In the rental market, there will be more choices, and then we can ease the pressure on the waiting list. There should be urban land to be found to build PRH units for the public. I would like to tell Paul Chen this now. For workers, I think it depends on where they work, and so they want to live in the vicinity. For the people waiting for a unit in the urban area, they outnumber those waiting for a unit in the extended urban area. This is because workers can only find a job in the urban area. If you ask them to live in Northeast NT, even if you can develop it, but then the units there won't suit their employment. Your time is up. Next, Ms. Chung Pui Ha, Mutual Help Network of Mainland Hong Kong Low-Income Families. I live in Sam Shui Po. My son is now promoted to P6. We've been trying to get a unit since his kindergarten days. What about the 3-year average waiting time? I don't think the government has honored the pledge. I went to the housing department. We've been told that for 4P or more households, it will take 7 years before you get an interview. So a far cry from the 3-year average waiting time. For 4P households, for us to wait for the allocation, everybody has to wait for 7 years or more. When the government plans the construction of PRH units, I think the government has hugely underestimated the demand for larger units. At the same time, we see many vacant units. Why are you not allocating them to the needy families? Now, of course, you don't feel the problem. For us, we are living in subdivided units. We face increasing rents every year. Every time we pay $500 or $1,000 more, and we have to pay more for management fees, etc. Secretary, can you understand our plight, our hardship? We've got 3 requests. First of all, for the urban area, there should be more sites for PRH units. Now, for land resumed in the urban area, usually you use it to build luxury flats. You have not considered our basic housing needs in the grassroots strata. And then please tell us where we have the vacant land in the urban area. Tell us about the timing so that we can please also tell us about the location of the vacant urban units so that we know what they are being used for. When we can't be housed in 3 years' time, I think there should be rent control, there should be rent subsidies so that we don't have to pay so much for our rent. Thank you. Next, from Yan Oi Tong Community Center, Mr. Kem Ken Ming. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We serve Tuen Mun area. I think you know that for Tuen Mun, you always get the impression that for Tuen Mun, the housing prices and the rentals would be lower in Hong Kong. But in the past few years, the housing prices have doubled and the rental have also caught up together with property prices. We understand that many people have been waiting for more than 3 years to get a rental unit, and then their rent is accounting for almost 50% of the income. This is found from our survey. There is this case. We have got households living in subdivided units in very bad living conditions. We have got a 3P household here. The 2 children are in secondary schools. They pay almost half of their income for rent. They can't retake it anymore, so they get a subdivided unit. They have a bunk bed. The mother lives up on the upper bunk, and then for the the mother sleeps on the lower bunk, and then the two children, but who are already secondary students, have to squeeze themselves into the upper bunk. They cannot resolve the problem. And so they have to go back to Shenzhen to have sufficient living space. So does it mean that you're asking all the grassroots who don't get a flat allocated to them to go to the mainland to live? Other than the subdivided units, we've also got temporary housing in Tuen Mun. Many deputations talked about subdivided units, but for temporary housing, it's also a serious problem. Now, given the very humid weather we've got now, and then with the heavy rain, you easily get flooding, and then many residents have to face the problem of water leakage and also problems with the electricity supply. And then a few months ago, the rooftop of the houses were damaged because of the hailstorms, and they're afraid that they may suffer from electricity shocks and they may get killed. So for people living in subdivided units and temporary housing, I think they badly need a rental unit. Please construct more units so that we can honor the 3-year average waiting time. For the vacant sites and also for sites where we have got a golf course, please use them to build rental housing. PRH should account for a higher ratio. We understand that private units account for a much greater proportion than rental units in the PRH. The government should provide rental subsidies. There should also be a rent control, and then we can help the residents. Next, Ms. Amanda Horrocks.
The Universal Declaration of Human Rights lists housing as a right to all human beings on the basis of a standard of living adequate for health and well-being of himself and of his family. And I truly congratulate the Hong Kong Housing Authority in trying to guarantee this right via the public rental housing scheme. But as by the end of 2013, 118,700 general applicants were still waiting for housing allocation on this waiting list. And this, what many call a crisis on the waiting list, is somewhat caused by a number of people who have already received a first offer but decide to refuse it because the government allows people to remain on this waiting list for a second or even third flat offer. But if finding accommodation is a welfare measure intended only to the most needy, people who wait for a second and a third flat offer do not fit into this category, because if they were in fact desperate for a place to live, they would have taken the quickest first offer. To decrease this waiting list and time people wait, the government should eliminate the second and third offer, because they ultimately serve the purpose of people who should not even be on the public rental housing system in the first place. The Housing Authority of Hong Kong is responsible to alleviate people's pains and not to be servant of selective wishes that slow down assistance for the ones who need the most. I myself come from Brazil, where programs like the public rental housing scheme do not exist. So if most Brazilian people who were homeless or lived in an unsafe and undignified dwelling had the chance to be offered a place to live on the standards of the Hong Kong housing system, I can assure you they would have taken the first offer. Giving people up 3 flat options make the system less efficient and less related to welfare and human rights, and more to a necessary government expenditure. By offering 1 flat to applicants on the waiting list, the government will be able to shorten this queue and attend more people who are in fact in need for affordable housing. Thank you for your time.
Next, Mr. Aiden Chen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We saw many APIs on NENT. It is said that 60,000 PRH units will be produced. But to be frank, I don't think we can build a block overnight. Even if you can get the approval to develop NUNT, you will only be 2023 that we get the first PRH unit. You can't tell people who are suffering from hunger that in 9 years' time you have your stomach fed. Now, we have got so many people on the waiting list. We need to allocate the resources. The rule is simple. Give it to those who have the greatest need. We don't have to allocate a PRH unit to rich men like Li Ka-shing. Now, for people living in subdivided units, people living in partitioned cubicles, they don't have money, they need a unit. When you're rich, when you are as rich as Li Ka-shing, then you don't need a PRH unit, and you should surrender your unit back to the government for allocation to the needy. Now, when I take a good look of the policy, I found that I am quite foolish. Now, you need to abide by various rules. You have the income tax or asset tax, and you have to go through many hurdles before you will. There are many factors affecting whether we can evict a wealthy household from being an existing tenant. Now, we have got 160,000 households who exceed their income. I think those on the waiting list have a stronger need for housing than those rich families. I don't think we should have this policy, which is in fact early bird catches the worm. I think this explains why many young people are scrambling to be on the waiting list. I think everything should be based on need. When that is the rule, then the waiting list will be shorter. People won't be queuing up just for its own sake. And I think it's better than developing NENT. Thank you. Next, Mr. Andrew Shin, Research Director of the Lion Rock Institute. We are concerned about the waiting list being lengthened to 230,000 in a few years' time. So we have to find out why it has increased so rapidly. According to the government's paper, well, for the non-elderly singletons will not be included, and then for those choosing the urban or extended urban areas, and then for those who have turned down the first offer, and fourthly, for those who haven't got 3 years in relation to the waiting time. The 4 categories have been excluded, and then you have only got 2,000 left on the waiting list, so a cut of 90%. If you talk to an alien from another planet, and if you tell them that instead of 150,000, we have now got 230,000 people on the waiting list in 2 years' time, then he would wonder whether there are many people sleeping rough on the streets. So it's a matter of queuing up. Now, we understand that people like the no-flat slaves, they said that they should be given priority. Now, I understand that the tertiary education has undergone a reform. And instead of studying for 3 years, now tertiary students have to study for 4 years. It will have an impact on the waiting list. Now, we have a bold idea. I think we spend $250,000 on each tertiary student, discount, not taking into account the tuition fees. I think we can provide the same amount of money to the young people. Now, the undergraduates are getting a subsidy of $250,000 a year because that's the money that the government spends on educating them. The inconvenient truth is that 230,000 people on the waiting list is really something that people would like to gain political capital. On the one hand, we want to build public housing. On the other hand, another camp, they would like to develop NENT. But in fact, if you take a good look of it, only 2,000 are really who are in need. Next, Mr. Yip. I'm 70 years old. I've been waiting for a flat for 4 years. When I first put down my name, the pledge was 3 years, being the average waiting time. We know about all the flaws in the public housing policy. You are familiar with them. I'm not going to repeat them. Now, I just want to ask this question. Why is it the government can't honor the pledge of 3 years, and yet the government would not have the courage to admit that this is a policy blunder? If you come clean, I'm sure the government will be sympathetic. We know that the government is trying blindly to get hold of land. But I think now, even though I'm already 70 years old, I have the ability to get a job, but I have been abandoned by society. How can I live on $2,200 by way of the old age allowance? I have to pay $5,000 for a subdivided unit, and yet on top of that, I have to pay for my utility bills. So I hope the administration will understand the difficulties of the grassroots. Now, many principal officials have to hide up. They did not face the public. How come that they are rendered into such a state? Have they ever considered that it is all because of the policy blunders of the government? Now, many people are living in great hardship, and the result must be that people would rise up against them. I hope the government will understand whether they know what urgent needs we have. And Professor Zhang has said that he understands that it is hopeless that we can really honor the pledge of a 3-year average waiting time. Can the government do something to allow the elderly to be housed early? I don't think there's any such policy. When the government fails in its policy, it means that we have to pay more and more for the rental for a subdivided unit. So housing isn't a right, and then the landlord can always send us out. And I am one such victim. Whenever the landlord wants to drive me out, then I have to leave. I have been searching for an affordable home from South Pt1 to Western district. So this is not something that we can cope with. So the people of Hong Kong will be sort of rendered into hugely miserable state. Now, for Little Street, for a small unit of 370 square foot, it is an open plan unit, and it costs you $7 million. How can the average citizen afford such a home? Thank you.
Time's up. Ms. Ho Lai Chen from Kwai Chung, Alliance of Kwai Chung SDU tenants. The government has promised a 3-year average waiting time, and most Hong Kong people have waited for 4 to 6 to 7 years, and many Kai Fongs are asking how long have we to wait. Can you not disclose information on how many PRH units are available in each district and the waiting time in each district? Can you not be more transparent so that the Kai Fongs can understand what situation they are in, how many more years they have to wait, so that residents can make a selection on their own? Say in Tung Chung, if the waiting time is 1.5 years, and then Sham Shui Po 6 years or more, then the Kai Fongs or the residents can then make their own choices on whether they are going to wait for a unit in Tung Chung or elsewhere. So if the government makes public such information, then the residents or the applicants can make their own choices on where they want to be to get a unit. Chen Shui-Chin from Support Network for Kwai Chung SDU tenants. While we have to wait for 7 years, not 3 years, to get a unit. I met with the officer, and she or he told me that you would get a unit in 3 months, but then I've waited for even longer than a year. Then I called them up and asked them, and they were treating us like beggars. So we had a very hard time. Now, say for in the Western District, Kar Wai Man Road, Kung Man Estate, well, the estate has been left vacant for 8 to 11 years. And the government is wasting such precious resources. The planning department has recently announced that the Kar Wai Man police ex-police quarters, 2,000 units will be built on this 5-hectare plot, but the government is acting too late. All the houses built are now luxury flats, and the planning department, in face of residents' opposition, is building 2,000 units on this 5-hectare land. But then actually much more flats can be built on this piece of land. So it's very difficult to get a flat in the urban districts, and I think the government is lying. The government told us that we can switch our option to urban districts. But then in urban districts, there are no PRH units available. So I think the government is lying to us. We can't get a flat even in 7 years. So you are asking us to change our option, but then no PRH units is available. I think the government is lying. The government says that it doesn't have any land. There is no land. But then if there is land, in face of opposition, you are building a small number of flats. Now, for the Northeast NT projects, the government is proposing building many units. So I don't get it. I don't understand. Well, for us, renting private housing, we get a rent rise once every 2 years. And if we can't pay that, we are evicted. Mr. Chen Po-choi from Kwai Chung Low Income SDU Tenants Platform. Chairman, I'm not well educated. There are now 240,000 applicants on the waiting list, and the government is still sticking to saying that there will be a 3-year waiting time. How did you come up with that calculation? Can you disclose more information on the different waiting time in different districts? We are not well educated, but at least from such information, we can get some hope. Also, the government will convert industrial buildings into interim housing for those on the waiting list. The expenses on living and food takes up so much of our income. We are left with no money at all, and we work in the low-level jobs. In your planning, will the government take into account the different needs for the different households with different persons in your planning? Also, rent control. The rental per square foot in SDU is higher than that for luxury flats. Now, we used to pay 4,000 for a 2-bedroom SDUs, but now we're paying $10,000. But the government, it's all because the government doesn't implement rent control. And I think the government should act with a clear conscience. And it is not imposing any rent control. How can we make our ends meet? Well, I am a person not well educated. We've applied for a PRH unit for 6 years. Now, if we find that the officials are making a mistake, we don't have anywhere to complain, to make our complaint. I don't think there is a good or sound complaint mechanism. Is there anyone to help those of us here who are illiterate, I and my wife, receive little education. Is there anyone there to help us? Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Tin Ka-shun from Support Group for Kwai Chung SDU Tenants. The government said that the waiting time is 3 years, but then there is a problem. And many of those SDU tenants in Kwai Chung, we have waited for over 4 years. How come that the government has so many vacant flats now and not putting them to good use? We have 12,000 vacant flats taking up 1.7% of all units, and 3,000 of them have been left vacant for over 1 year. So my question is, why hasn't the government put good use to these vacant flats and allocate them to those on the waiting list? For Kwai Chung SDU tenants, our living conditions are extremely poor. There is this case that there are hygiene problems, and the residents of the whole family suffer from respiratory and skin problems. So I hope that the government can expedite in dealing with hygiene issues in SDUs. The government has also vacant government quarters. Can those be converted for as interim SDUs for those who have waited for 3 years? Could they be given priority to be rehoused in these vacant government quarters so that they don't have to put up with such expensive SDUs and bed spaces? In the use of land, can the government recover premises, say, for private clubs or even the Fanling Golf Course? Can the government build housing on those sites? Next, Ms. Kong Fong Kok Ying's concern group on SDU in Kwai Chung. I'm a single mother. Papers said that many SDU tenants have to wait for longer than 3 years to get a PRH unit. Can the government resume more land to build PRH? Can the SDU tenants be housed more quickly? Well, some 60 to 70% of the applicants on the waiting list should be given a flat more quickly, while the SDU tenants, our living conditions are poor, the rental and the utility fees are high, and the condition is extremely poor, and there is water leakage in my flat. I have 2 children, and we are scared all the time. So whatever land the government resumes, please build more PRH to house the SDU tenants. Well, industrial buildings can also be converted and be used for rehousing SDU tenants on an interim basis. So much from me. Next is Mr. Ng Kwan Lim from Concern Group on SDU Grassroots. The theme today is average waiting time for PRH. Housing has all along been a concern. I don't get it why the Secretary is not here himself to listen to our views. Is he attaching importance to people's views on housing issues? I really don't understand. Now, talking about 3 years average waiting time, And I don't know, starting from when the government said that is average rather than a general figure. All right, if we say it's an average waiting time of 3 years, how many people can really get a unit in 3 years? Now let's look at the situation in SDU tenants in Kwai Chung. Well, we have to wait at least 4 to 5 years to get a unit. So how accurate is this average waiting time of 3 years? Can the government be more transparent with its figures? The Housing Department has sent letters to applicants, and they told them that they have 3 offers, and they sent them this letter saying that there is this unit where a person has died or there is water leakage problem. Would you take it up? Well, of course, 9 out of 10 applicants will not take it up. And they said that this offer of the flat will not be included as one of the 3 offers. But then is it the case that when this kind of undesirable flat is offered, is considered as a first offer, and then the waiting time is reduced accordingly? So I would like to hear from the administration on that. Now, another case, there is this person waiting for 4 to 5 years, and he gets a unit in Changguano last year, but then it was stated that he would get a flat 6 months later, and then he actually moved into the flat in June this year. So when we talk about 3 years, was that calculated based on the last year or this year when he actually moved into the flat? So we want the government to clarify that. I think the government should be clearer on its statistics, how the calculation was made, how the 3-year calculation was made. And apart from the figures, as what other groups have said, we would like to suggest that the URA is resuming a lot of land in Chunwan and Kuntong, and they are building luxury apartments on the resumed land. They're not building PRH on those plots. They must have a social responsibility, and how can they be allowed to build luxury flats only? I think the URA should reserve a certain ratio of its land for building PRH. I think that's very important. I will talk about my other comments later. Now is the time for the government to respond to individuals and deputations' views. Thank you, Chairman. I will start from the question raised by the last individual. Well, I will make a consolidated reply. One issue we mentioned is what is meant, how is the 3-year waiting time calculated? In the allocation of PRHU, we want to take a humanistic approach. Now, what we meant by 3 years waiting time? And that refers to the average of the waiting time of general applicants, house to PRH, starting from the registration to the first offer. There will be a frozen period. Say when the applicant has not fulfilled the residence requirement, the applicant has experienced a change in his family condition. So the frozen period is not included. Now, the average waiting time for general applicants, i.e. elderly applicants and family applicants, refers to the average of the waiting time of general applicants housed to PRH in the past 12 months. The government has mentioned on many occasions this definition in public occasions and at the LegCo. And actually that is also clearly written on the HD's website. And for every quarter, we would update the figures and announce the figures and put the figures on the website. I think we have made ourselves very clear. And also in response to the individual's question, that brings another point worthy of our attention. There are certain flats which are not welcomed. Say there is a homicide case in a certain flat. So we want to clear about that. We allocate flats randomly through the computer. So if there is such a flat offered, we would state clearly that such untoward incident has happened in this flat. Now, if an applicant doesn't accept such an offer. Of course, we have certain definitions on a flat affected by negative factors. So that offer would not be included as one of the 3 offers. Now, some people may not like such flats, but in fact, there are some other applicants who do accept such flats. If the applicant has a pressing need for the housing, perhaps he has certain religious beliefs, he doesn't mind about such a homicide incident, and they may, he may take it up. So we can't take an across the broad approach and said that the government is making up the figures by the use of offers of such flats. Now, also, we calculate the waiting time based on the first offer. Now, individual applicants may have their own considerations. Say, maybe they refuse a flat on the ground that this is not an undesirable district, or the house is not favorable. But the same flat may appeal to another applicant. So, therefore, even if we have 3 flat offers, well, it's really up to the applicant to decide which offer he accepts. Well, it has nothing to do with our playing around with the figures. I think it all boils down to whether an applicant accepts the first or second or third offer. Now, some people have also mentioned about 4P households, so waiting time is relatively long. We want to have the target of 3 AWT. This is a fact that 4P households are waiting longer. I think it has to do with supply and demand. The number of applicants is huge, and the number of newly built or recovered flats is not enough. And starting from 2011, we have made an analysis, and in 2013, June, we also conducted analysis, and we also presented the analysis results to the housing panel. And we saw that for those housed by June 2013, their waiting time and who waited the longest period. And we see that those are the people who are waiting for a flat in urban or extended urban districts. And I think this is most natural because the supply of PRH units in urban extended urban districts is relatively less.
So we look at the situation in June 2013. For those who are waiting for urban or extended urban districts, of course, the queues are longer, and most of these are 4P households. And in 2016, June, we will conduct another round of survey. So this will provide us with an indicator so that we would know how to balance the supply and demand in a better manner. And when we look at 13, 14 to the years afterwards, we will see that there will be more production. As for 2 to 3 person household, there will be 23%, and for 1 person family, 39%, 2 bedroom units, 16%. Urban and extended urban districts, there will be more flats. So this will be the production in the coming few years. We hope that we can help solve the problem a bit. The major reason is that the supply always falls short of demand. So we are trying very hard. We want to look forward. We'll try our best to recover flats. We want to combat housing abuse, and also we want to identify new sites for housing production. Of course, this cannot be achieved overnight. We will try to compress our timetable. However, the fastest time frame we're talking about is 5 years, provided that everything is smooth. But if we do not do anything today, then nothing will appear after 5 years. Some people said that we are afraid of difficulties, so that's why we do not build housing PLH units in the urban district. But actually, this is not true. It's very difficult to identify sites in urban districts, and in particular, large sites are very rare. We also have to consult district councils, and I can tell you that this is very difficult because residents in a district have their own views. They are very concerned about the environment, the impact on traffic, and they are afraid that there will be visual blockage, etc. So all these factors have to be taken into consideration. And some people ask us, how come we do not develop new sites? Well, you can see that the government is trying very hard to develop new sites. But as you have seen, there are a lot of obstacles. Anyway, the government will endeavor to do this, but this is not just the efforts of the government or the HA. We hope that the community can join hands so that we can achieve these goals. Well, just now it's mentioned that there are many vacant flats. I think that's a misunderstanding here. Well, the vacancy rate of PLH is only 0.6%. In the audit report 61, it said that there are many vacant PLH flats. However, when we reported to the PAC of the LegCo, we already explained that many of these units cannot be rented out, and there are many reasons. There are many reasons. For example, when we ask applicants to consider whether he wants to take this unit, then we cannot allocate this unit to another person. So that's the consideration period of the applicants. And for example, a certain estate is to be redeveloped, so the units in that estate cannot be reallocated. Hence, for example, at Tai O, Long Chin Court will be redeveloped, so we cannot allocate those vacant flats. Just now, we also talked about PWDs. On different occasions, we have answered similar questions. We rely on compassionate rehousing to take care of their needs. We are allocating 2,000 units for them a year, but if you look at the past years, you will see that we tended to be very lenient. As long as WD recommends, we would consider. So in the past years, the quota of 2,000 was exceeded. We allocated more than 2,000 units to PWDs. SWD did not just look at the cases itself, it also relies on NGOs. But the SWD has a set of guidelines, and the NGOs would adhere to that guidelines. Of course, each guideline has its uniqueness, and we also have to rely on the judgments of the social workers. As for PLH resources, how can it be used more efficiently? Well, I've had two polar views. Some want us to combat over-occupation households, and some other want us to provide more flats to young people. And some people think that these educated young people can have more opportunity to climb up the social ladder, so maybe resources should be reserved for other people. So the HA would have to strike a balance. And the Long-Term Housing Strategy Committee, as well as the PAC, have gave us some suggestions, and we will be conducting a review on our policy. Please be succinct. We want to help elderly one-person applicants to be housed as soon as possible. Maybe I can stop here, and then I can answer other questions later. Two members have indicated their wish to speak. First, Mei Kun. 3 minutes each member, including questions and answers. Chairman, I would like to thank the deputations for coming to the hearing. As for the Deputy Secretary's answer, maybe you can just give us a paper, because you've been just talking about figures. Now, many of the people here are waiting for PLH, and actually they have met the criteria. They are in the waiting line already. We are trying to find out how we can help them. You are saying that you cannot meet all the demand in a short time. We have made a suggestion. Well, during the waiting time, you can give them a rental allowance so that they can rent a better place. And also there should be rental control. Well, do you know that the rent per square foot for SWT is even more expensive than the rent per square foot for luxury flats? So can you give those people who are living in SDUs and cubicles a rental allowance? Do you know that the SDU rental would be raised every half a year? With rental control, next Monday there will be a more detailed discussion at this panel. For those who are on the waiting list, can they be given a rental allowance? In the past, the Secretary has already answered this question. Now, if rental allowance is to be given, does it really help the tenants? This is a doubt. Now, if the owner of the SDU knows there is such a subsidy, he will further raise the rent, so the tenants may not benefit. And we do not think this is the best way to solve the problem for the tenants. So according to your logic, now if you give Hong Kong people electricity subsidy, then CLP would increase electricity tariff. And for students, they have traffic subsidy, and bus companies would increase bus fare. That's according to your logic. Now, all the people here are waiting for PLH flats. And you are saying that the supply of public flats cannot catch up, so you must do something. Actually, the ultimate solution is the increase in supply, and we are trying to solve the problem by providing more flats. Of course, that's right. You should provide more flats. However, you should also try to help those people who are waiting. Well, for Kwai Sing West Estate, there are only 48 households living in one block. So how can you allow things to be like that? Mr. Albert Chan? Ms. Wong is a technocrat, and if we want to rely on her to solve housing problem, is a dream. She's just a technocrat. She's just looking at the issue from a technocrat's point of view. When McLeod was the governor, the government didn't have money, the government didn't have land. However, each year they could provide 85,000 new units, and each time they were able to find sites to build PLH. So after the handover, nobody knows how to work. At that time, the government was not that rich, and each year it was able to provide so many flats. And now the government is inundated with money, and it has so many years experience. We just want 30,000 units to be built a year, and the government says that it cannot find sites. Of course, this is not your responsibility. It's Paul Chan's problem. He's hoarding land, and now there's no land for public housing. This is absurd. The residents want to get more compensation. He says no, but he's going to pocket more than $10 million because he has hoarded land in Northeast NT. So the rich and the powerful can pocket a lot of money, and poor farmers cannot get any better compensation. So you are just a technocrat. I understand that you have problems, but I have 3 questions. Now, that's a promise of an AWT of 3 years. You are just saying that you will up to the first flat offer. So was it the old way of calculation? Did you also calculate it this way? And there will be second offer and third offer, and usually you just have to wait for several months for the second or third offer. But now people have to wait for 1.5 years for the second offer. You are sacrificing this because you want to shorten the first offer to within 3 years. So can you give us more figures? How about first offer, second offer, etc.? I have asked the HA this problem, and I understand that for second and third offers, people have to wait for a very long time. And also for compassionate rehousing. In the past, the SWD handled most of the cases, but now many of the cases, or half of the cases, are handed over to NGOs, and the professional social workers' recommendation letters are not accepted. Only SWD's recommendation letters are accepted. This is a waste of public money, and you are not respecting the social workers. And also about looking for land. Now you will not use PLA's land, you will not use golf courts land. If you do this, you'll never have enough land. Well, Mr. Chen wants to have the information on second and third offer. In the past 2 years, I want the figures for the past 2 years. Yes, I've told her. Mr. Lee Chok-yan, 3 minutes. Chairman, the residents are facing a lot of difficulties, and the rental level is so high that they really cannot afford anymore. But you are just telling them more public housing will be provided after N years. So at the moment, you are not helping them. Just now we talked about rental allowance. Yes, there is a risk that is maybe you are actually subsidizing the flat owner. But if you have a rental control policy, then with this two-pronged approach, the present situation can be eased. However, you are not willing to do any of this. For rental control, you are dragging your feet. You say that you have to carry out studies. But people cannot afford the high rents anymore. I don't want to see any tragic incidents happen. But if you drag on like this, then the problem cannot be resolved. And I have to give you some time to answer the question. Well, for the AWT, I think, well, you have just been rigging the figures. You are saying that for the first offer, it's just 3 years. But you just discriminately allocates a flat, and the flat may be in a very poor condition, and that's already considered the first offer, but the applicant doesn't want it. So if he wants to wait for a second offer, he has to wait for another year. So do you have the actual figures? That is, when that applicant really gets his flats, what's the AWT? It's not just about the first flat offer, because I think you are playing tricks. You are trying to cheat us by giving us such a figure. I have answered this question many times. We can only look at the first flat offer by the HA. If the applicant accepts the flat, then that he has already housed. But as to whether he accepts the flat or not, that's out of HA's control. I'm just asking for the statistics. Why not? Why can't you just give me the figures? Let me continue, please. If you want to know that in the past 2 years, you want to know about the waiting time for the first offer, second offer, and third offer, etc. Of course, we can give you the figure. But there are some variables. First of all, now if this year a certain number of flats is produced, and are these flats in the urban district or not, that affects how many applicants will be accepting the offer. So there are always changes. There are many variables. But what we see is that the waiting time has been longer and longer. Mr. James Toh. Chairman, I have lots of things to say, but I'll highlight several points. If there is a non-elderly one-person applicant and he's a tertiary institution graduate, would there be demerit points? The HA says that it will look into it. So has there been a conclusion yet? And I agree with Mr. Albert Chan. It's very strange because if social workers recommend a case of compassionate housing, the case has to be referred back to the SWD. I find this very strange. Why is that? Because this is like discriminating against the social workers. And for rental allowance, now many people even cannot afford SDUs, and they even have to live in mini warehouses. 3 years ago, I already heard about this. A social worker told me that people started to live in mini warehouses. Well, of course, they do not want to do that. I hope the government would understand. But for rental allowance, the government has only one reason. The government says that if a rental allowance is given, then the flat owner will increase the rent. Well, do you think that will definitely happen? Yeah, economically, you may say so. Because if you do that, then more people will be renting SDUs. What's the extent and how many people will benefit? And how many people without allowance will be affected, etc. So you have to carry out a study. You can't just say that there is such a possibility, so you won't do it. Well, you should leave them some time so that they can answer.
I just urge her to carry out a research. There's no need for an answer. I want to know if the administration is aware of the number of people who is renting a property. They will still be renting a property. I don't think anybody receiving the rent subsidy would take the initiative to pay more rent to the landlord, or he will be interested in using the rent subsidy to rent a larger property. And then there are also people who are living with their family members who are afraid that by providing subsidy, they will split household and rent a property for their own use. I think you need to look into the matter and try to find out about the demand. I don't think we should simply dismiss the idea by saying that this may give rise to an increase in the rental because of the increase in the demand. Fernando Zhang. We are grateful to have so many deputations, individuals coming to talk about this long-standing issue. It's a matter of the property hegemony and also high property prices, and then the real estate property sector and the government are colluding. Now, it is difficult for us to afford our own home or to even afford to rent a place. For the young people in Hong Kong, for them to raise their family, for them to rent their own place, it is hugely impossible. For elderly people, for 4P households, again, they have a very serious problem. For the case of the disabled, I think it is outrageous. I don't think we can't have a policy today to address the needs of the disabled. I understand that Mr. Zhang would also like to be given more time to supplement his views. He's from the Housing Rights for Disability. You don't want to ask the admin any questions? I would rather give time to him to supplement. Yes, be brief, please. If I may put a question to the Deputy Secretary. For the waiting list applicants, do you know how many are disabled? You just ignore the needs of the disabled. Do you know how many there are? And then for compassionate housing, you have told us that for the past 3 years. Among the 2,000 compassionate cases, there were just over 100, and last year only 50 disabled persons successfully get rehoused on compassionate ground. Just assuming that 1 out of 10 is disabled, then we still have 10,000 or at least a few thousand disabled on the waiting list. Just now, Guyan has told us that she has to wait for another 10 years before getting a flat. So the government is most careless. I've asked the question for last year for compassionate cases. I think the number given to the disabled has been decreased drastically. What about the idea of giving the disabled a separate queue like the elderly? For compassionate housing, we have not we haven't got a sub-quota for the disabled. For compassionate housing, we rely on the SWD for their professional judgment. That is, whether the disabled should be given a PRH unit on compassionate grounds. As I have said, our counterpart is the SWD. For the SWD to do the assessment itself or getting a contractor to do it is their business. For our policy, we don't have a sub-quota for the disabled. In this way, it will be more flexible. Now, time is up. We have almost exceeded by 9 minutes. For questions not yet answered, maybe the admin can use the time in the second session to answer those questions. So that's it for the first session. In 10 minutes, we're going to resume and we'll have the second session. So we'll have a break now. For the deputation individuals in the second session, please join us in the second session. I would like to thank the officials as well as the deputations individuals for attending the first session.